Canada Day has recently passed, but that's not the important thing that happens on July 1st. No, no, no. Most important thing that happens on July 1st is NHL free agency. Now, there's lots of deals, lots of players moving spots, players like Steven Stamkos, who've been on one team for a long time, going to be in a new jersey. It'll be weird. But instead of breaking down every single signing one by one, what we're going to do is go over kind of our favorites, our least favorites, and just kind of give our own opinions on what this most recent free agent frenzy was like. So how this is going to work is I'm going to start by tossing it over to Simon. He's going to give me one of his favorites, then I'll give one of mine, then we'll go to one of our least favorites, then back and forth. So, Simon, why don't you start us off by giving us one of your favorite signings of this most recent free agent period?
I thought you were gonna go least favorites first. I already had one picked out, but I'll go favorites. Favorites is a lot tougher because
Okay.
I would put all of these. I would put all these about on the same spot on how much I like them. I think. Oh, that's right. I had an honorable mention for favorites. I'll shout out this guy first because not necessarily. I actually don't like his contract for Columbus, but Sean Monahan getting a 5 by 5.5. That good for him. Knowing where his career was, even like 2 years ago, the Flames traded him away with a first-round pick to get rid of him because he just was too injured, and nobody really knew if he was gonna be able to play again, let alone if he did, whether he'd get anywhere close to what he used to be. Signing a 5 by 5.5 is really impressive for him, and good for him as well. But not signing him until he's 34 for Columbus is an interesting look. Definitely considering the history, but no, regardless, good for him. I didn't have the heart to put it on my least favorites.
I think that was one where I both thought about putting it on my least favorites and favorites.
That's how I feel.
Where I was like, oh, like, man, like he's doing a lot better. He's gonna reunite with Gaudreau. That's so smart. Like they have great chemistry. And then you just like think about it a little bit more and are like, wow, they're paying him that much money. And
for that long,
for how long?
In
and
that sense,
just kind of
brutal.
goes back down.
That was my honorable mention.
It's a good fit.
Yeah, that was my honorable mention.
They overpaid for a good fit. They overpaid for a good fit.
I'll probably start with the smallest name of the three. That being said, they're all big names. In Brandon Montour signing a 7.1 by 7 with the Seattle Kraken. I had that as one of my favorites. I think that's a great deal for them. They had a couple big moves in this free agency, but I thought that was their best. I think they're bringing in a top line defenseman to really help them out. This is starting to look like the best team they've had since that first year where they were able to make the playoffs. This team's looking really good. They have a lot of youth. Now they're bringing in a lot of guys who have been there, done that. And Montour, it's a long deal, and I don't know how much. I don't actually have his age in front of me, which is something to look up. But isn't he like 30?
I can pull the age. Yeah, he's not young. He is 30.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Cap hit of around $7 million.
Yeah. So it's a long deal for a lot of money, but I don't know if they're necessarily worrying about what'll happen at the end of that deal. You know what you're getting at the start of it, and he deserves that $7 million contract. So, at least to a degree, I think it's a really good deal for them. I think this is a sign that they're going to be looking to contend, as well as the other big moves that they made in free agency, which I'm assuming we'll get to at some point here. But regardless, personally, it was in my top 3. I think it's a really smart move for them.
Yeah, and I think I don't know. I think I'm a little bit more torn on it. Just because when I look at NHL free agency, I think the teams that do the worst generally are the ones that are the most reactionary. So I always get I always get a lot of trepidation whenever I see signings from recent Stanley Cup champions, because a lot of the time you've seen them a lot in the playoffs, and then a lot of the time they kind of fizzle out. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen with Montour, because I actually do really like the player, but I do worry about overvaluing necessarily. and $7 million is a huge cap hit, and that is for a long time. What was it? Seven
It's
years?
Yeah.
Was it a 7x7?
Yeah.
Which is that's a long-term investment for a lot of money, and I just think this isn't. I didn't like make my least favorites or anything. Like I did consider it for one of my favorites just because I really like the player and I really like the fit. I do think just the terms of the contract scared me away a little bit because I do think that is a lot of money. I do think he's worth it, especially for that team because it really beefs up their decor.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just like it to me it feels like one that could go either way because it could either be great fit on great team and you don't care how much you pay for him, or you look at it as an overpay if he kind of falls short even just a little bit. Like it's never going to be looked at as a steal of a deal. Is kind of what I'm looking at.
No, I agree with that. I think they got him for pretty much exactly what he deserves. In fact, they might have got him for cheaper than he deserves, considering he is coming off a bit of a down year, just not including the playoffs. But I do see where you're coming from. I think they are giving him a lot of money, and I'm always a little scared whenever I see those 7-year deals handed off to 30-year-olds, which we saw a lot of in this year's free agency. Actually,
we did,
and I'm sure we'll talk about that a lot. But I don't know. I like it a lot. I think the team fit makes a lot of sense. I think he was going to get a deal like this pretty much anywhere he went. And I think out of all the teams he could have got it from, I think the Kraken are probably the team that made the most sense at this point.
That's true.
So at least in that sense,
I love the fit.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I honestly, I was looking at his stats on NHL.com, and they have like all the Kraken stuff around him. It looks right? Seeing that logo next to his name. So I like it a lot. I see where you're coming from though. If you want to give one of your favorites, because
Yeah, so I think I'm going to start with probably I'll start with my lesser known name, but honestly one of my strongest opinions. And this kind of goes along, so my general opinion on NHL free agency, I think a lot of moves, even the ones that look good in the moment, most of them don't pan out. A lot of times people will overpay, and a lot of times the big contracts people will give out do spoil over time, which is why I love when teams focus on signing a lot of more smaller pieces or depth guys that when it comes down to it in the playoffs, they're the ones making lots of the contributions, while some of the teams that have put a lot of money into these star players often fizzle out because they don't have enough room for anybody else. And this is a team that I think has had a huge shift in philosophy. Maybe not philosophy is the right word, but just a reinvigorated focus on getting some depth pieces. And this is a signing that, while I mocked it a year ago when they initially signed this player, after watching his performance in the Stanley Cup final, I can say this is an absolute steal for someone who is very key to the Oilers' depth, and that's Connor Brown. I never thought I'd be saying that a year ago.
Wait.
Yes.
I was not ready for that. I don't even have his contract in front of me.
No. So it was
not even on
$1 million.
List. What is it?
It's $1 million for a year. It's $1 million for a year, and I think I don't remember exactly what his contract was last year, but this is around the same. And I just think, with how critical he and Janmark were to that penalty kill, which was their strongest unit throughout the playoffs, I just think it's so important. You saw him play his best hockey in the playoffs. I think it shows a great. Obviously, that's great at any time, playing your best games and the biggest games of the season. But I also think it kind of adds to the fact that he was coming off a huge injury, and I think he only got better as he got healthier. And it isn't like, I think what we were worried about last year was the framing of it, where it's like, oh, he's reuniting with McDavid, he's going to be McDavid's line mate, and people are being like, oh, this is the signing of the season. Now it's going under the radar, and I think I don't have the contract from last time, but I think it's pretty similar. Because I was scared that someone like him would
probably been less, wouldn't it? I would have thought
If
he would
it's
have
less,
gotten
it's
minimum.
not by much because you.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
If it's less,
yeah.
it's not by much.
No,
You
it would
can't
have
get
been
much
like
less than this, which is what
900,000.
I'm impressed with.
Yeah.
Because I thought that someone was going to give him like a big bonus because of how he played in the Cup final.
I don't know.
Um,
He had 12
I don't know.
points
To me,
in the regular season. Just I know considering the injuries, there's a big
it's not the
asterisk on
point.
that.
It's not
I
the
know
point
that's not the
number.
point, but I'm adding on the fact that like we just had this conversation about people basically overpaying for people who play well in the playoffs, right? I think that gets taken away when you only get 12 points, and I think he probably knows that. As much as last year's contract with the Oilers was a prove it type contract, I'd actually look at this year as a real. This is his chance to prove that he's worth, like being the type of guy who can get that more than $1 million for a year, right? Multi-year contract in the NHL, and prove that he deserves the money that a player of the caliber we saw in the playoffs would assumingly deserve. But I think it makes sense that he doesn't get that contract yet. I don't think anybody would have given it to him. Because no matter how good you are in the playoffs, if you can only score 12 points in the regular season and 4 goals in your most recent season, you're not going to get anything. Doesn't matter how good you were in the playoffs.
No, you're not. And I think that worked out to the Oilers' benefit. And my point is not to say, like, my point isn't even necessarily about, oh my goodness, Connor Brown, like best player imaginable. It's not. It's the value that they got for this.
First line center, Connor Brown.
Yeah. And touche to the point about playing well in the playoffs, as I just said, and then kind of went back on. But I do think that's different just because of the injury, and just because it was more of a steady progression over time, less so than just feeling like he's being overvalued because we saw him play most recently. I do think this is a bit of an exception to that rule, and that rule most generally applies to when people are like giving out huge contracts, and this is nowhere near that. And it's a great value piece that I think goes along well with the rest of their signings.
Yeah, I also wanted to add on to that, even like playoffs, 19 games, 6 points. Like even with I know that's not the point you were necessarily trying to make with how important he was defensively, mainly on like the penalty kill and stuff like that, but I don't imagine even like a mainly penalty kill player isn't going to get any type of money doing 6 points. Like he just didn't have that enough offensive output to really warrant, I think, getting a bigger contract. I think this is his year to prove it. Because I absolutely see where you're coming from. I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but I have a hard time. I think the Oilers got him for exactly the same anybody would have gotten him for. I think, if anything, the main reason he's sticking around with the Oilers is this is the team that gave him a chance. Now he's going to get a real chance to see if he can prove that he could do it on a bigger scale, I guess. If he can keep improving, I think he'll get a bigger contract. But, yeah. I guess we'll see. It's an interesting contract. Or not an interesting... It's an interesting player, is what I mean.
I just think it's one of the more under-the-radar ones that I think is going to end up being pretty important. I think the fact that they were able to re-sign a lot of guys similar to Connor Brown that really helped them gives me a lot more hope for what they'll be able to do next year. Yeah. Like, that was one of my big question marks. Okay. Anyways, do you want to get to one of your least favorites?
Sure. I think we'll stay in the Pacific. I think I'll go with the one that... And we didn't rank these, like, neither the favorites or least favorites, but out of all of my least favorites, this is the one I hate the least. It's, again, with the Kraken, as we were talking about, with another one of their bigger moves. They brought in Chandler Stevenson on a 6x7, I is oddly pretty similar to what they gave Brandon Montour in a lot of ways. Both players will be there for the next 7 years. But I don't like it because... And there is a pattern of this year with a lot of teams giving... And it's a pattern that isn't unprecedented. Like, we've seen it in the past, but it feels like this year we're seeing it even more than usual with... And this is going to sound like a big punch in the nuts to Chandler Stevenson, who I think is a bit better than this, but giving role players long-term deals like that, I don't really agree with that. Like, he's a 50-point player, and he's absolutely worth like a $6 million contract. He's great defensively. He can score when you need him to. He's a great playoff player. But a 7-year deal, really, it's a punch in the gut to me a little bit, especially with the center depth that they have coming up. Like, they have so much depth at that position, and like, even like 3 or 4 years down the road, I could see a world where he is the third center on that team. Do you really want to be paying your third center $6 million?
Yeah.
That's brutal. Like, he's good, but I don't know if he's worth. He's not going to get any better. He can only get worse, and it's a tough contract, at least to me. Like, more length than the actual like. I think in 4 years that's going to be a really bad deal. Right now it's not bad. They don't have a lot of people they really need to pay urgently, but when they actually do, that contract's going to start to stink a little.
Yep, and I agree. We're actually knocking out two birds with one stone here, because I also have him as one of my least favorite contracts. This is kind of where the Kraken's moves kind of puzzle me a little bit, and I do, talking again about the more reactionary teams being the ones that kind of scare me a little bit in terms of not making good moves. This does feel very reactionary, just in terms of, trying to follow their expansion big brothers, right? Like the Kraken 2 years ago had a great season. They go into the playoffs, they beat the Avalanche, and it's like, oh yeah, they're picking up momentum because the Golden Knights set such a high bar for success as an expansion team, and it looked like the Kraken were actually going to do the incredible job of somewhat following it up, with how much success they had in the playoffs a couple of years ago, and they just took a huge step back this year.
Yeah.
And so part of me wonders if they're like scrambling, like, what do we have to do next? Just like, you get in some guys, proven play, bring in Brandon Montour, proven playoff performer. Let's get Golden Knights, bring in Chandler Stevenson. But it just feels like it is, I think, such an overpay for him, like you said. And I think that the term, like you also pointed out, is a huge concern as well, because it was 7 years, and he's 30. It's another one where it's like, are you really giving these 30-year-old players 7-year deals? Like, that contract is going to look so bad when they start aging out of it halfway through the deal, and you have to be paying him this obscene cap number for another like 3 years when it already looks like shit. I don't know, and I never thought he was one of the key pieces that made that Golden Knights team hum. I mean, you look at what a guy like Marchessault got in terms of a deal. I felt like he was much more vital to their success, and his cap hit's about $1 million less. I just feel like it's...
Is it really? I didn't think
stuff
about
being
that.
allocated. Yeah.
Wow. Another point I was going to throw on there, just to throw it in the mix as well, is the fact that it kind of makes me wonder if they're starting to doubt what they have in Shane Wright as a prospect. Because I think if the Kraken internally are starting to think maybe this guy doesn't have the potential to be a second or like a first or a real center, right? Like a real guy they can rely on in the future, then this contract makes a lot more sense. Because I think, honestly, signing Chandler Stevenson to be your long-term second-line center, I'm okay with that. But, like, if we're talking about Shane Wright as a prospect, when he came into the league, and even now, I'd still consider him as a potential second-line center. Like, I think more now I'm leaning more second than I would have been in the past, saying a first-line center, but I still would think second-line center for Shane Wright. And when you sign that for a third-line center, that's just absolutely brutal. So it does make me wonder if this is them giving up a little bit on what they have in their prospect pool, but I don't know. It is an interesting deal. It's definitely a head-scratcher, because I didn't even think about the fact that they're kind of going after Golden Knights. That's a good point. Because it is odd. Like, the Kraken have a weird team. They've had a weird team since they came into the league. I've been saying that for a while. Like, they're just like, the Golden Knights after that first year didn't necessarily feel like misfits anymore. You know what I mean? Despite that being like their whole thing, they didn't feel like misfits anymore. Like, the Kraken feel like misfits, and they've been in the league for a few years now. Like, they still feel like that. And that is kind of the one thing with me, where I look at this team and it's just a bunch of guys who on any other team would be really good, but on this specific combination, it just feels wrong. So, I don't know. That's how I feel about them at this point. I don't think Chandler Stevenson helps them out too much.
No, I agree. And I do think they're just kind of searching for an identity. because I don't know how you can't following up the Golden Knights. I don't know how much that actually plays into the decisions they're making. Probably very little. Like, they probably don't actively think about it, but you know that pressure has to be there with how well the Golden Knights have done in the last 5 years.
I bet they do think about it, because
Yeah, you think so?
it's got to be like a big. I mean, it's almost like a locker room thing at that point, where the coach has pointed out, like, look at what they've done in their time here. Do you really want to be the guy who couldn't do that? Right? Like, it's kind of that type of thing, right? Like, I think they absolutely do think about it, because I mean, I wouldn't say there's a rivalry there, but there's almost like a spiritual rivalry in a way, right?
Yeah.
I think we should move on.
It is like a sibling rivalry.
Yes,
almost.
that is
Big brother, little brother.
Very good way to put it, actually. But we're 21 minutes into this thing, so we should probably speed up a little bit.
Okay, let's pick it up. Well, it's a good thing we can toss it right back to you for a favorite, because we knocked out my least favorite as well. So
okay.
So let's hit another one of your favorites.
Well, my favorites, we go back to the big names. I think because the funny thing is, a lot of the big contracts this year I like a lot, and I don't necessarily think they have downsides in a sense. I think where we'll start with the least interesting one, because I think my other one is a bit more interesting. But yeah, let's go Sam Reinhart, 8.6 by 8 with the Panthers. I have that as one of my favorites. Not a lot of people. There were some people questioning whether he would be coming back because they didn't know whether Florida would be willing to pay him. Now we obviously know they were, and I think he absolutely deserves that number. He's proven that time and time again at this point. There's a lot of questions about him when he first came into the league. He wasn't really living up to those expectations, and he has completely turned those around. And I think out of a lot of the players in free agency, if he had gone to market, he would have been the player probably getting the most money. So seeing him stick around, I mean, how can you not pay your 57 goal scorer that amount of money, right? Like, he was such a huge part of their Stanley Cup win, and they lost a lot of pieces, but I think making sure they keep Sam Reinhart was a huge win for them, because now you're kind of in a spot of, sure, we lost Montour, we lost, I'm sure there's more, but suddenly off the top of my head I can't even remember.
Tarasenko,
that's a
just
good one
got
too.
Signed today.
Yeah, but the fact that you're able to keep Reinhart is just so huge for them. So I have that on as one of my favorites, just because of that. Like, that's got to be huge for the Panthers. Yeah. I know the whole fan base is pumped about that.
Yeah, and I think this was just like the biggest no-brainer. Like, you win the cup, and then you just put that as next on your do list and try to check it off as soon as you can. Like, it was. I don't even know if we need to spend that much time on it, because it really is just kind of a, like, yeah, why wouldn't you do that? Right? Like you said, why wouldn't you sign your 57 goal scorer? It really is just kind of it was almost like a reflex signing of a contract, I bet. You offer that and you don't think twice about it.
They handed him a blank check.
Yeah. And I mean, the only thing, like, if I were to nitpick it at all, you always worry about, like, coming off of career years, if it was something he can sustain. But I think that's a little bit less of a concern for him at this point in his career. Like,
in 2022, he had an 82-point season. Like,
that's what I'm saying. Like, no, and that's why I say it's a nitpick, right? Like, it's something you have to think about, but it's not something I'm thinking about for very long, because we haven't seen production to the level of last season, we've seen similar enough level of production.
Yeah.
To say, like, it's something we think can be sustained. It's not like a peak out of nowhere.
Yes. When I say he wasn't living up to the hype, if we want to look through his career and kind of just look at it a little bit, like, in his first season in the NHL, first not real season, he had 9 games played, 1 point. Not necessarily looking too pretty. Everybody's freaking out. The next season, 42 points, 23 goals, which, not bad for a sophomore. That was technically his rookie year. Pretty good for a rookie season. And then we look at, after that, he had his first and only ever below 20-goal season in his sophomore season after that one. And then for the rest of his career, he was averaging 20 goals or higher. It was mainly in this assist category where he was kind of lacking. He mostly mostly sat around 50, 60 points up until he joined Florida in 2021, where he put up 82 points. And then since then, in all 3 of his seasons with Florida, he's had 30 goals. So it's 30 goals or higher. Obviously, last season getting 57. But I think $8 million feels cheap for a guy like that, honestly. Like, it's just such
with some of these other contracts going around. Yeah.
Like, that feels like a really good deal for a guy like him. And I don't know how long they have Barkov locked down for here, but they've got that core for the next little bit. Because I know he's not. I don't think he's coming up.
No, I would be surprised if
not
he
even
was.
He's still 3 years down the road. So I think.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're going to have the majority of their core, or like elite core, locked down for the next little bit, which is huge for them.
Yeah. I can move on and give one of my favorites, and we've kind of already we already brought up this player briefly, but I think my next two favorites, one of them is more for a team fit, one of them is more for contract value, and I think this one is my contract value pick, and that is Jonathan Marchessault. Because especially I think the best thing you can do for this deal is just compare it to the Chandler Stevenson deal.
Yes.
Just because I think he was so much more of an impactful player for this Golden Knights team, and a lot more of their success I felt like was created by him. I mean, he was an original Golden Knight, and had been one of the best players on that team, one of the better teams in the NHL for pretty much his entire tenure there. It's been consistent, sustained success. It's a guy I am more comfortable giving a long-term deal out to. And at a cap hit of only $5.5 million, I'm not like sweating too much about that. Where I'm saying like that's a pretty good value for that kind of player, especially considering what some other players are getting that I would value less than him. I think with the fit, I think the Predators off season has been kind of interesting. I don't know if we'll get to Stamkos, maybe not. But I just think it's interesting. To see the kind of moves they've made. They're really pushing, like they're thinking they're a contender, which I don't know if I would have necessarily pegged them as one before like the last few weeks of the season when I kind of caught fire.
Yeah.
They had a good showing in the playoffs. I don't know. The team fit, I'm kind of like, I don't know. I feel like you're jumping on the pushing for a Stanley Cup a little bit too early, and I feel like they're more kind of a team in the middle. So team fit isn't necessarily my favorite, but in terms of a pure value deal, if I'm a GM looking like what's the best player I can get for this amount of money, I think Jonathan Marchessault is definitely up there.
What was the number again? I'm looking at his stats right now. I don't have it in front of me. Wasn't it 5 by
27.5 for 5 years, which comes out to 5.5 million per year.
Yeah. Okay, that's about what I thought. I think he's very deserving of that. It's for 5 seasons. That's a little gross. Till he's 38.
Yeah, it is a bit of a long contract.
I mean they're going to be paying Stamkos for just as long, I guess, or not just as long. How long Stamkos?
Yeah.
4 years. Like they're going to be, both of them are going to be around till they're not necessarily in contention.
These will be their last contract.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. Yes, definitely for Jonathan Marchessault. But I like it. I like it a lot. The amount of money makes a lot of sense. That 5 years feels very long. Like if you would have asked me how much I thought, or how long of a contract I would have thought Marchessault would be getting, I would have thought 4 years at the max. 3 years would have made a lot of sense. 5 feels like a bit much. Like, because sure, that 5.5 price tag is nice now, but I don't think it'll be that pretty, like, even 3 years down the road. Like, for the last 2 years of that contract, it's probably going to be ugly. I love Marchessault as a player. I think the fit, you say you don't like the fit. I think him on a top line next to Stamkos is a ton of fun. So, at least in that sense,
yeah.
I think it'll be pretty cool to see. I like the Preds are trying to beef up a little bit, especially after... I was thinking when they signed Saros that it kind of almost didn't make sense if they were going to try and, It seemed like they seemed like the team that was going to be treading water a little bit, and this is clearly a sign that that's not what they plan to do. So...
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I still think they're not really a team that goes past the first round, but I guess we'll see. They're a team that could surprise people, I'd say.
Yeah.
I would not. He is not
I
on
think
my
so, too.
least favorites. I don't have him on my favorites though either. I think he's kind of. I like the contract. I like the contract for
fair.
both of them, but it's.
I understand your point about it being a bit long because I think he is like, I think
He
he
did
is
just
older
have a
than
40
people
goal.
think.
He's a 40 goal
That
scorer in his
yeah,
last season, so it's
that's
like.
that's what I think though. It's
Yeah.
because like I just think he's been such a consistent player that sure
Yeah.
there's probably going to be a drop off towards the end of that contract just because of age. But if there's any player, like I think I said this before, if there's any player that I'd invest in long term, is a guy who's shown how consistent he can be over time.
True.
That aging curve is going to happen. Like it's going to look a little bit worse in the last year of that deal. But I don't think for a player like Marchessault that's going to be as dramatic as some other players around the same age.
Yeah. Okay, are we going to least favorites? Is
Least favorite.
Is it mine? Are we doing mine or yours?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So I just did Chandler Stevenson. Okay. So my next two, I think. Nah, that's a lie. One of these I think is actually worse than the other, but I'll go with this one first. I have Jake DeBrusk to the Canucks, 5.5 for 7 years. I hated that contract the second I saw it. That contract made me go, like, do I think Jake DeBrusk isn't as good as he actually is? Like, it actually made me stop and, like, look up his page on NHL and go, like, what are his averages? Like, because I've always looked at him as, like, a second or third line player. And that's no offense to DeBrusk. But I've always looked at him like that. This last year, he had 40 points on a pretty good Boston team. And you're paying him 5.5 for 7 years. That is ridiculous. Like, sure, he probably deserved, like, it's not even the money. It's not about the money, Spider-Man. But it's paying him that much till he's 34 is just, I don't know. There's so much I just hate about it, especially with how many good players the Canucks have. The players they let go to be able to give him this contract. It seems like it's a crazy amount for me. It might just be me, but I don't like it at all.
No, it's not just you. I'm with you on that. I do think the term is kind of crazy. I do think, yeah, it's a lot of projection that's happening. I think with Vancouver, you're almost just kind of like figuring out a way to tape back together the magic of last season. They're just like, oh, like he'll be good eventually, and you're just kind of like throwing pieces at it and hoping it works. I agree. I didn't have this on my least favorite,
When's
but
eventually
it isn't necessarily
coming? The dude's
because I don't
27.
agree. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I didn't have this on my least, but it's honestly just like it's not because I disagree. It's not because I disagree. If I had a fourth slot, I'd probably slide him in there. Like that's one that's pretty bad. I don't necessarily know if I have a lot to add. It's just a lot to pay for a player that hasn't shown a lot, and it's a lot of projection to do. It just feels like they probably in their scouting were a lot higher on him and just like see a lot of potential in him or something, because like otherwise it's not all there.
They got to be seeing something that we don't. Like, that is a crazy contract to give out if you don't. And I mean, it's not like the Canucks are not sort of known to do this at this point. Like, I think the Ekman-Larsson contract not that long ago, where they gave him like a bonkers amount over a bonkers amount of years, and he lived up to that. Not at all. Like, it's that type of stuff that just kind of leaves you a little bit puzzled. And the Canucks are, it's unfortunate because of the season we just saw them have. It looked like they were heading in a new direction, and this kind of makes me feel like this contract as a whole just feels like a step back in a way. But like, I have a lot of the same issues I have with this signing that I do with the Stevenson signing in a weird way. But honestly, I think I like the Stevenson signing more than I like the DeBrusk signing. Funnily enough, like it's just that type of thing. So I mean, I'll hand it over to you if you want to give one of your least favorites, so we can try and keep this under an hour.
So Yeah. Speaking of the Canucks, my next two least favorites. I kind of cheated and put two signings in there for both of my next two, but
Okay,
it's
that's
because I
fine.
think they're both kind of similar.
Yeah.
Um, my next two is two former Canucks going to the Bruins, also
Okay.
two former Flames, and Elias Lindholm and
So we're going to be
Nikita
ticking
Zadorov.
off
And
both of my least favorites here because I have Elias Lindholm as my other one. So
wow, there we go. Okay, so we will speed up the segment a little
yeah, a
bit.
little bit.
It's just to kind of give my reasoning on both. It really does feel like, um, I don't know, you're just kind of picking the Canucks' remains at this point, because they were so good last year, and it just feels like the Bruins missed the point with this whole thing. I do think I don't hate the fit. I think I could see like Zadorov especially. I could see doing really well in Boston. Like I
Really,
think
I don't
his
like that
style of play
contract
will
either.
thrive there.
I
Well,
don't
I
have
don't
it.
like I hate the
Yeah,
contract. I hate the contract, but I don't hate the fit. Like I think it's fine.
we've
I just
seen
think
that Big
like
Z's
it's
work
very
in Boston. This has been well
yes,
established.
yes, yeah. Although I don't know if you saw him come out and say like,
I did
"Don't you
see
dare
that. That's
call me
why I made the joke.
Big Z
But
anymore."
yeah,
I thought that was funny.
very
Yeah,
classic. Very
um,
classic. As he should.
yeah,
Like that
as he
nickname
should.
dies in Vancouver.
Yes, yes. Yeah, he's already fitting in well, with that comment. But I just think the money is kind of insane, paying him 5 million a year for 6 years. And same thing with Lindholm. Well, I think Lindholm is a lot better of a player and deserves more money. I think paying him close to 8 million a year is insane.
It's
And doing that for 7 years is also insane. Just because I think both of these guys were never the most fundamental piece to their team's success. Not in Calgary, not in
and I was
Vancouver.
gonna say
Like
that. Yeah.
Lindholm was extremely underperforming in Vancouver for the first couple of weeks, and I think everybody in Calgary kind of was like, "Yeah, that doesn't surprise me," because he was always better playing with the star player. Like when he played with Gaudreau and Monahan is when he thrived the best. Like he thrives when he has other like superstar players to bounce off of. And who knows, maybe like you put him on a line with Pasternak and he'll have that same kind of spark. But you are paying him like he is a Pasternak at this point,
Yes.
and I don't
Yeah.
think he deserves that at all. And it's a very similar thing with Zadorov, where I just think he was not he's never the reason why his teams do good. He provides a spark, excellent personality, like he'll get your team going, but he's not like you don't pay Zadorov to be like a top line defenseman, but they're paying Zadorov to be like a top line defenseman.
Yeah.
Neither of those signings make a lot of sense to me. I put them together just because it does feel like the Bruins kind of missed the point on both of those players. They're paying them like their number one options when they are really just excellent complementary pieces. And I don't think they've ever really been more than that in either of their careers.
I will add on. I think that there is a way the Lindholm contract could end up looking very good. And it completely depends on how well he plays on a line with Pasternak. Because while I
Yeah.
completely agree with you, I think Lindholm is elevated by the talent around him. I think we've seen that. That's the biggest lesson we've learned in the last 2 years. Is he is not somebody who succeeds by himself very well. If you put him around the right players, he can absolutely be a stud for you. That is what we learned when he was on that line with it was Goudreau and God. Now I don't even remember who it's been so long. Who was right wing with that? Who was it again? Kachuk?
Was
No,
it Kachuk?
whatever. It was whatever line it was that was really really good for Calgary for a good while there. Like when he's around the right talent, it works. We've learned that, but and it can like I think that if he can return to being an 80-point scorer in Boston, this contract looks really good. Like on a line next to Pasternak, this contract could look really good, but could they get somebody? Is he as good as the average $7 million player? No, not at all, and he won't be in 7 years either. Like it's that type of thing, absolutely. So I do agree with you. Zadorov, I would put him probably as my fourth least favorite. I don't like that deal. I like Zadorov as a player. I think that the fit makes ton of sense, like a ton of sense. I made the joke about we already know that Big Z works in Boston, but it's like Boston's a very physical defensive team in a sense like that. Like it's why they're good. It's why they're consistent. And I think he's like a perfect second line defenseman for them. Do you want to be paying your second line defenseman that much for that long? No, not realistically, but maybe they're hoping he can elevate his play a little bit to being that first line guy. Who knows? Might be a little hopeful, but we should. Do you want to move over to favorites? How many do you have left here?
Sure.
Because I just have my favorite.
I have one favorite and one least favorite.
Okay. So yeah, I'll do my favorite first then, if we want to do that, and then we'll throw it, and then you can end the show off. But Jake Gensel is my last one, signing with the Lightning.
Okay.
I love this deal. I think a lot of people were really mad at the Lightning, and rightly so, for just pretty much dumping Steven Stamkos and signing Gensel. It's absolutely like a bit of a ruthless business move. Like it's not something that necessarily makes you feel good in the chest, seeing Steven Stamkos basically get replaced with a younger guy. Did the Lightning just extend their like I don't even know what the word is. Their
championship window.
Yeah. They probably just extended it 3 years with this deal. And I personally think it makes a ton of sense. What they had for the longest time that made their championship winning team so good was the insane center line duo. I mean, Kucherov obviously, but like having Braden Point and Stamkos down the middle, like on their top two lines, was so lethal because both of them could have been a top line center on any playoff team in their own right. And now we're seeing them actually get the chance to build a proper first line of Point, Gensel, and Kucherov. Are you kidding me? That is insane. Like, that is an insanely stacked first line. Like, that team's going to be so fun to watch next year. They got a lot younger. You can make the argument they got better defensively. Gensel is definitely better back there than Stamkos ever was. Are they losing that, like, finesse scoring touch that Stamkos had? Sure, but that wasn't going to stick around for more than a year or two. It was already going, right? Stamkos was already on the decline. So personally, I think this Gensel contract for the Lightning was probably the best deal. That wasn't a re-sign. I would tie it with Reinhardt on like overall value, like going to a team. But out of all the new signings, I love it. I think this contract makes a ton of sense for them. I think they had to give up a 3rd round pick to like make it work for some reason. I don't even remember why.
Well, it was basically because the Hurricanes essentially traded him to the Lightning a day before free agency started,
right?
Just so that Tampa could get a head start on negotiations. Same thing happened with Tanev, who we may or may not get to later. But yeah, I completely agree with you. I think I don't. I don't know if I almost just like feel like it's a little like obvious at this point. I tried to go a little bit more hipster, but this free agency, I feel like
I'm actually happy you did that because now I feel like we had 6 completely different players, so it worked out well.
Yeah, but this free agency, like I don't disagree with anything you said. Like I do think this free agency was to a certain extent the Jake Gensel sweepstakes. Like he was the best player on the market that was available. Like maybe you say Reinhardt, but like I don't think there was ever any doubt he wasn't going to stay with Florida.
Yeah, there was a doubt at some point after they won the cup. I think that doubt went away a little bit, but earlier in the year there was a little bit.
Fair enough. But for recent years, recent months, that hasn't necessarily been the case. Recent years, yeah. We've known for years that he was going to stay with the Panther. But anyways, I can move on to my...
He was going to be a Panther right from the start. Panther for life.
Right in our heart. I can move on to my next pick, and I will immediately give the caveat that I do think this is a little bit of an overpay, but I do like the fit to the point where I'm willing to just turn a little bit of a blind eye to it, and that's Teuvo Teravainen into the Blackhawks. And I just really like this kind of move. So it was the cap hit is a little bit like, I'm gonna close my eyes a little bit. So he's getting paid so $16.2 million for 3 years, $5.4 million cap hit, which is a little rich for my taste. Like I don't necessarily love that, but everything else I love about this deal. I just think it's such a good like support signing, because when I look at the Blackhawks, and I think we talked about this in a segment not that long ago in terms of what the Blackhawks needed to do, and it's just to surround their young. It was during the draft segment. They've got the young talent. They got Bedard. They brought in. I can't pronounce the guy's name. I'm so sorry. The defenseman they just took, Lavashnikov.
Oh shit! I don't. Without it in front of me, I can't either. It's.
I know. I can see it.
Oh shit! I'm gonna.
I think it's like, yeah. What? I'm so sorry. But anyways,
it's okay if we both can't pronounce. Levshinov.
Yeah.
Levshinov.
There we go. So with Bedard, Levshinov, they've got other young talent there. I think they're going to continue to build out that young talent, but this is kind of the next step you take, where you sign one of these guys that can just be a solid top 6 guy for you, where you just kind of plug him in and you don't worry about it. Like, he's not going to be a star, but he's going to provide some excellent support. Like, if you pair it, like, I don't even know if he'll pair up with Bedard on the first line, but if he does, he'll do really good at it. I just think it's one of these signings that you look at and you just like, it just feels right in terms of a team building move. Even if it is a little bit of an overpay, I just think the foundation is there and the process is there for the Blackhawks to say, yeah, like, this is how we want to build our team. We're going to have to pay a little bit to get there, but we're building our team and we're putting this in process and we're not going to flounder. We're taking steps towards succeeding. That isn't like, I love it because it just feels like so much of it's the perfect middle ground, because I feel like a lot of teams, once they get young players and start seeing promise, they're just like, oh my God, sign, big names, Steven Stamkos, throw him $8 million.
Well, that was the funny thing.
I'm just,
because that's what a lot of people wanted Chicago to do. Like, we heard Stamkos, we heard Gensel, we heard Marner at one point. Like, there was names all over the damn place.
Yeah, I just think that kind of stunts your growth, because it's not natural growth. Signing a guy like Teravainen feels like it incentivizes this natural growth of a team, and that's what I love about it, even if it is, in my opinion, a little bit of an overpay.
I would have been a lot madder if they signed him for longer. Like, I think anything over the amount of years...
Yes, that helps too.
Anything over the amount of years that they gave in 3 years would have been an overpay. I think a team in their position paying Teravainen for 5.5 for 3 years, right? Wasn't that the 5.4 maybe? Whatever, it doesn't matter. But
5.4.
Yeah. Like, I think you almost have to overpay a few guys when you're in Chicago's boots, because you can't go under the limit. That is the one rule, right? So I think it's actually a pretty smart move on their part. They don't have to pay Bedard for a while, so that's the big one, right? Because when Bedard's contract comes up, he'll be getting money. But as for this, I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think them paying for a guy who can, and then again, he is not known to do this. This was his most ever, I believe. Yes, it was his most goals ever. So it was a career year in a way. He had 25 goals last year, only 53 points. So in that sense, not the guy I want to be paying 5.5 if I'm a contender. Exactly. Chicago is not a contender. Yeah. So I do agree with a lot of your points. I think it makes a lot of sense. You're bringing back a team guy. He was on Chicago during their cup runs as well, so we can sit in front of a campfire in the locker room and talk about the stories of old. So you get that as well.
I don't know if Chicago necessarily wants to talk about the stories of old.
That's a very good point as well.
You
gotta hope that Teravainen doesn't have many stories of old, but like.
So Teravainen, let's hope, was off doing other things. Anyways, I guess you don't have a least favorite anymore.
I don't. My least favorite was Lindholm. I can probably come up with another one if we really want to try and like.
Do you want to pull one out of your ass?
I'm quickly scanning. Oh yeah. Oh fuck! Wait, no. Least favorites is way harder.
It is.
It is a lot harder.
We can
go first. You go first, and then I'll see if I can come up with something.
Okay. If you've got one, we can end with that then.
Sure.
But my least favorite one of my last least favorite. It's one where I don't know, man. Brad Tree Living. I don't know. I don't know what's going on over there.
Yeah.
It's just like, so we've got Chris Tanev is one of them, and Oliver Ekman Larsson is another. It's another package deal one, because I do think it's another very similar thing, where it's just like, why are you giving a 34-year-old defenseman a 6-year contract? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Um, Oliver Ekman Larsson is 32, and they paid him for 4 years, so it's a little bit better. But I think Ekman Larsson is of significantly less talent, and I think it also kind of speaks to the, oh, he just won the cup, let's get him, that kind of philosophy. That scares me a lot. I don't know. It's just like, if I'm the Leafs, I feel like there's so many other moves that I could have done with this combined. Like, how much is that? I can't math. With this combined 8 million, I feel like you could have done a lot more.
Yeah.
And I think if I'm to play devil's advocate in my own head, I can say, like, the last few years of the deal don't matter anyways, because the Leafs window is already going to be closed at that point. But it just feels like bad process to essentially say, like,
but
we're going to burn out the last 3 years of these deals because we just needed to work this year. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how many years either of them have left.
Yes. I will add on the fact that I like the Oliver Ekman Larsson contract significantly less, actually. Because I think since...
Yeah, I like them both equally.
And it hurts.
I think the Tanev deal is good right now, but it's going to be bad in like 2 years, and then you've got 4 years left.
I hate that Oliver Ekman Larsson fell off so hard. Only the homies remember, like, 2016, 20-goal scorer Oliver Ekman Larsson. That dude was fun to watch. He had a cannon from... What happened to the shot, man? I don't know if he still has the shot, but he sure as shit doesn't know how to use it. Like, it's sad. It's sad that he fell off this hard. If we can see the Oliver Ekman Larsson of old on Toronto, that might be the one situation I might be happy with them having a little bit of success. I actually sort of like the Tanev deal. I think 3.5 for a defenseman like him feels so
4.5.
cheap. Was it 4.5? I don't even care. He deserves more than that, in my opinion. Like, not even necessarily for what he personally does, but and we got to see this firsthand with the Flames for so many years, he elevates whoever he is playing with to a different level defensively. Like, it doesn't matter. You could throw me on right D and somehow it would work. Like, he is so good defensively. And obviously there's worries. Like, there's a lot of worries, especially with the Flames. There was always the jokes going around last season before we traded him of, quick, trade him before he injures himself. Like, as shitty as it sounds, there were a lot of people saying that because he does have a tendency to slide face first into pucks sometimes. So it's a bit worrying to hand a guy like that a 7-year deal, I will say. But in a lot of ways, I like it because of exactly what you said. Their window will already be closing. 4.5 for a guy who adds so much to your defensive. Like, he instantly turns around my thoughts personally of that defense in Toronto. Like, sure, I think Oliver Ekman, if we're packaging them together, Oliver Ekman Larsson is the only reason that really decreases, like, that entire deal. Will both of those deals look terrible 4 years down the road from now? Absolutely. But
I don't even know if it's 4 years. It's going to be like 2. Like, you just brought up the fact that
Tanev doesn't need to skate to dive face first in the pucks. He can be 55. It don't matter.
Tanev is already 34.
Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying in terms of, this is not a knock on Tanev the player. Let me get that straight. I think adding Tanev to this Leafs D-core is actually a move I really like. And I do think it improves my opinion of their core immediately as well. It's just like, the philosophy around this move is just something I hate. Because it's like, oh boy, we're going to be in a grave in 2 years. Let's just dig it deeper because we can. Like, like, what the hell is that? Just because you're going to be screwed in 2 years doesn't mean you want to make it worse. Because I do think 4.5 is very cheap for a guy like Tanev. Oh boy, I wonder why they got him so cheap. It's probably because they were like, hey, listen, buddy, we could pay you $6 million a year, or we could give you retirement money for an extra 2 years. What do you think about that? And he's like, you know what? Sure, yeah. Like, give me that money. I'll take it. I'll sit on the bench and be like Mark Giordano, just like still hanging around in my 40s, but not
The
playing at
difference
all.
was Giordano wasn't on 4.5.
Yeah, exactly. I just think this is gonna like we talk about lots of these contracts aging poorly. I think there's like maybe one or two good seasons in there, and then the rest of the deal is gonna age like a milk. If if 2/3 of the deal we're already saying, oh yeah, well that's gonna be the bad part, then the whole deal is the bad part. If more than half of it is the bad part, the
Oh, it
whole
won't be
deal
more
is
than
the bad
half.
part.
We had this conversation before
I
as
don't
well.
know.
The whole thing of like, when a guy shows you that he can be consistent, Tanev is the model of consistency. That man has been diving face first into pucks since he came out the womb. And he will continue to do so for as long as he needs to. And I have full faith that that will be the case. But, yeah. No, that would be my opinion on that.
All right. Were you able to come up with a least
Sure.
favorite, or
Yeah, I have one. I think
throw out one?
yeah, I'll throw out one. Why the hell are the Leafs paying Max Domi for that long? What did he do to deserve a four-year, $15 million deal? It's cheap, it's sure, but I don't know. You could have gotten better for that money. Like the dude had 9 goals last year. Sure, 38 assists, but it's like you could get better. Like I understand you're bringing him in to be like he had 118 penalty minutes, which is like that's the big thing in a lot of ways. Like you're bringing him in to be that power forward presence, and Trilliving loves his power forward presences. But come on, Trilliving, Max Domi's 5'10". You can do better than that, buddy. Why do you want a 5'10" guy on the team? Like we can Trilliving. If you're gonna be signing a power forward, let's get in the mind of Trilliving right now. You gotta go at least 6'6" defenseman or something like that. That's where you could have brought Derek Englund out of retirement, Trilliving, with that kind of money. You could have done a lot of things. So yeah, that's my other one.
Yeah.
I don't hate that anywhere as much as the other ones I have on my list, but like, I'll throw that one out there as well.
No, that's fair. I don't know. I just can't hate a contract that's that cheap that much. I don't know. It's like, yeah, and it's too long. It's too long, and they could have most certainly used that money elsewhere. But it's like
too long for a guy
not...
that hardly is worth that much.
No, yeah, I agree. I agree. It's not going to be my favorite signing either. I might have a soft spot for him because in my NHL 14 franchise, I got him and he developed into like a 90 overall. And like, he's like 150 points in a season.
If we're gonna
maybe
do
that's
that
what they're
though,
maybe Brad Freeliving hacked my NHL 14 account and was like, "Hey, this Max Domi kid's pretty good."
Yeah, well, just like that, I was obviously the one to find Connor McDavid in NHL 15. Yeah, where he had a significantly better career with my Calgary Flames, and then he was drafted to Edmonton, and I deleted the save file. shred the evidence.
We all have dreams. Hey, maybe McDavid's contract is coming up soon, right? We talked about it before. Maybe your dreams will come true. Dreams will come true, Simon.
Here's my rant coming like how many 9 years too late. I still remember this. I'm still mad about this to this day. In that franchise, I made it to 2019. I brought Ben Bishop, the prime Ben Bishop, Connor McDavid. I had a stacked team. Like, there were stars everywhere. And then the Flames didn't fucking renew my GM contract. And I had to go to Chicago. I was so pissed. That is the only time that has happened to me in one of those games. I don't even remember why. I was so mad. So, yeah, there you go. I also won a cup for them. I was like, thanks, guys. No, yeah, it was great. There we go. That's my final the memories of NHL 14.
That's a good way to end it. You're a better GM than everybody else in the league.
Absolutely.
And people don't give you the credit.
that's not something we needed to think about. Like, you should see my NHL save file right now that I've been playing. Got like fucking Gavin McKenna. What was my top line again? Gavin McKenna, an overpaid Goudreau, and fucking who's my right wing? Oh, Coronado, who I developed. That's my top line. To anybody out of Calgary, that sounds really bad. But like, imagine 4 years down the road when Goudreau's like literally walking with crutches because he's like 36. It's gonna be great.